Hey everyone, how are you? Matsu here. Good to be back with you again for another post. Doing something a little bit different at this moment because I thought it was imperative to just sort of detour a little bit from the timeline on food science because I felt it was important to just touch on some things because of just observations and just because of my concern for us and just looking at some fundamental things that I think we need to understand. So, as you see by this, as you're looking at this first slide, it's entitled Sudden Cardiac Arrest What You Need to Know. And I think what's important about this is that many times, most of us, when we go to the doctor or we get any type of health information, things aren't really explained to us. And so, um, we kind of walk away just with, with what we're given at that moment, um, not understanding some of the intricate connections that we may need to understand. So I'm just going to take about 10 or 15 minutes just to explain some things that I think um, is very important for you to know, for all of you to understand in as it relates to your health. And as it relates to a problem that we have that has to be addressed within with our people as a nation, we should be. Now, I know I'm cognizant of the fact that, of course, that we're coming from a place of we're in our captivity. We're coming from a place, some of us, of not understanding certain things, the ways in which we were told to feed ourselves and our families, what we understood nutrition to be, so on and so forth. But um, I think there's some basic things that we should understand, and so let's kind of just call it. Well, I won't say common sense, but things that we should be able to observe that is just not as it should be. So, you get in your car, you tend to put on your seatbelt, not because, um, if you're spotted by the police, you're going to get pulled over and get a ticket. You understand and you recognize either through things that have happened to others, best practices, that it's probably important for you to wear your seatbelt. You have an accident, we can see that, depending on the severity of the accident, it's probably going to help you. So let's look at the issue of being overweight or obese. And this is an issue, it's a real problem we have with our people, with our men and with our women. Being obese is not a good thing, right? Being too overweight is not good. It comes with all types of risks. One, of course, is a challenge to to a person's quality of life. You're not able to move the way you would like. You're tired. Of course, you run the risk of having any of the three chronic conditions, whether it's hypertension, um, high triglyceride levels, or diabetes. But one of the things that happens is that many times when some of our people are obese, we get into this place of a false comfort in thinking that because when we go to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, Mr. So and so, Miss So and so, or Mrs. So and so, you don't have diabetes, you don't have hypertension, and you don't have elevated triglyceride levels, so you have a clean bill of health, though you're obese. No. The answer to that is no. You're still at great risk. And one of the things you're at great risk for is having sudden cardiac arrest, which can end up in what we can call sudden cardiac death. So I'm just going to explain a few things. We're going to touch on some quick points. And I'm hoping that at the end of this that you'll be able to see the imperative of making changes. Yeah, making changes that not only will set you on a different path of health, but will um, lower your risk for something such as sudden cardiac arrest, right? So one of the things that we're going to take a look at, one of the things we're going to take a look at here, just so you can have an understanding, because I think it's important that, when things are being explained, that everyone has a real good understanding of how things work. And maybe, some of you that may be listening, you may understand certain things, but nonetheless, it may be worth the time. So we're going to look at how your heart gives off an electrical impulse. And this is very important to how things work, right? And so we're going to look at how this works and how that ties into to having sudden cardiac arrest or death, right? So let's look at your heartbeat. Your heartbeat is controlled by this electrical impulse that your heart puts out, right? We can call this, let's call it the timing, right, of the heartbeat. So your heart's electrical system controls the timing, right, of your heartbeat. It regulates your heart rate, which is, let's say, the number of times per minute, or your pulse, your heartbeat per minute, right? There's a rhythm to this, right, which is, you can refer to it as the synchronized pumping action for your heart. So you touch the area of your body where you can feel your heart. You'll feel that if you touch the points in your body where you can take a pulse at a certain part by on your neck or on your wrist, you'll be able to feel that synchronized pumping, that rhythm, right? So the heart's electrical system, right, maintains what can be referred to as your steady heart rate. For some people, that could be 60 to 100 beats per minute at rest. For someone that's optimally healthy and fit, that low number can be as low as 40 for some people, right? So the heart's electrical system, right, it's going to increase this rate to meet the body's needs. So when you go out, you exert yourself, you start to do things, that your heart rate is of course going to increases, because that it requires that electricity movement of your heart for you to be able to do these things, right? Now, later on, as we get further in the presentations that I'll do, we're going to go into some things that I'm not going to mention here, right? Now, why is this important? Your heart rate is going to increase, right, to meet the body's needs during physical activity, right? And then your heart rate is going to lower during sleep. So you'll find that as the body shuts down, less is going on, you're not moving, your heart rate is going to generally get lower. This is, in some cases, this can be referred to as your resting pulse, both if you're sitting awake and not active, or if you're asleep and active. Obviously you're not active, right? So how does the heart's electrical system work? Okay, we're going to look at some various areas, right? The heart muscles is made up of tiny cells, right? Your heart's electrical system controls all the timing of your heartbeat by sending these electrical pulses through the cells, right? Now, two different types of cells in your heart enable that electrical signal to control your heartbeat, right? Let me see if I can put this into simple terms. Just as when you go to an electrician goes to a point to install, whether it's an outlet or a switch on the wall, you're going to have what's known as you're going to have a conducer, a conductor. So your heart also has conducting cells, right, that carries the heart's electrical signal, right? The muscle cells then enable your heart's chambers to contract, right? That action is triggered by that electrical signal that your heart puts out, right? So you're going to have several nodes. Again, the same way an electrician will tell you, there are different nodes of how they work and how things are set up, points, right? Some may use nodes, some use points, right? That electrical signal is going to travel through that network of conducting cells, right? Or you can call them pathways. That's going to stimulate the chambers, the upper chambers of your heart. So if you look on this thing I see here, that I have a slide I have for you picture, you're going to see one of those upper chambers. It's known as the atria, right? And the lower chambers are referred to as the ventricles. It's going to cause these areas to contract, right? The signal That's the electrical signal that your heart set out. It's going to be able to travel along these pathways by very complicated reactions. That's going to allow each cell to activate one next to it, and so on and so forth. And it's just sort of like a domino effect. And so this stimulation, right, you can refer to it as being passed along, right? That electrical signal, it carries on itself in a very orderly way, right? Cell after cell would rapidly transmit, just keeps transmitting these signals, right? An electrical charge, right? The entire heart is then going to contract in one coordinated motion. That's known as your heartbeat. The electrical signal is going to start in a certain other group of cells, which is located at the top of your heart, right? That frontal area up there. Now, this area is going to called the SA node. So if you look to your left here on the slide, you're going to see that SA node, right? That signal is then going to travel down through your heart, and it's going to trigger, right? First to the atria, and then to your two ventricles. In a healthy heart, if your heart is healthy, right, the signal travels very quickly through the heart. In an instant, if you hear me snapping my fingers, allowing the chambers to contract in a very smooth and orderly way, right? Once this happens, your heartbeat is going to follow this particular motion. The SA node, which is known as the pacemaker of your heart. That's why when someone's heart gets sick, the electrical impulse doesn't work, they install a pacemaker, because that SA node is known as the pacemaker. It's sending out that electrical impulse, right? The upper heart chambers are going to contract. The AV node, which if you look here, I have the AV node below the SA node, or the anterior intermotal, right? The SA node, or the AV node, is going to send an impulse, rather, into the ventricles. The lower heart chambers, the ventricles, are going to contract or pump. The SA node is then going to send another signal to the atria to contract, which starts the whole cycle that I outlined to you all over again, and it just repeats itself, right? This cycle is followed by one contraction. One contraction is one heartbeat, and it just keeps going. Now, this is a simple explanation of how your heart works. But here's the thing. When the heart becomes strained, right, because it has to deal with all these issues of the body, what ends up happening, whether you have diabetes, whether you have inflated blood triglyceride levels, or you have hypertension, you can still be at risk. And we're going to look at why you're at risk. What are the differences between sudden cardiac arrest or sudden cardiac death and heart attack, right? Sudden cardiac death, or SCD as it's called, right, is a sudden unexpected death caused by a change in heart rhythm. Sudden cardiac arrest, it is the largest cause of natural death in the United States, causing about 325,000 adult deaths in the US each year. Let's look to the right. Sudden cardiac arrest is not a heart attack, known as myocardial infarction, but can occur during a heart attack. Heart attacks occur when there is a blockage in one or more of the arteries to the heart, preventing the heart from receiving enough oxygen-rich blood. If the oxygen in the blood cannot reach the heart muscle, the heart becomes damaged. Right, now, again, let's highlight the difference between heart attack and sudden cardiac arrest. In a heart attack, you can also have cardiac arrest because the heart is now obviously in it, nothing is working, so you can have both things occurring at the same time. However, you can have sudden cardiac arrest without having a heart attack because the two things are triggered. If you're having them separate, two separate things going on, they're caused by two different things, right? Yes, The similarity is that something is going on with the heart. Heart attack, though, 99.9% of the time is caused by blockage, poor diet, buildup of plaque within the arteries of the heart, which actually begins in other areas of the body, which we're going to touch on at another time, right? And then sudden cardiac arrest, right? The two things are completely different. And this is how people many times can fall into this false sense of safety when they go to the doctor and the doctor tells them that they don't have any of the three chronic diseases, so they feel if they're obese, they don't need to go out and make the change that they need to make. So let's look at this. In contrast, sudden cardiac arrest occurs when the electrical system of the heart malfunctions and suddenly becomes very irregular. The heart beats dangerously fast. The ventricles may flutter or quiver, which is known as ventricular fibrillation, and blood is not delivered to the body. In the first few minutes, the greatest concern is that blood flow to the brain will be reduced so drastically that a person will lose consciousness. Death follows unless emergency treatment is begun immediately, right? One of the greatest dangers of obesity is having what's known as sleep apnea. This type of sleep apnea is what's known as obstructive sleep apnea. Though there are many factors that can cause this type, it is usually caused by being obese. Excuse the typo there. I can't really drive this home enough, right? I know that many of us have a busy schedule, but there are ways in which, if we really want to, that we can make the changes that we need to make and be consistent once we've made those changes to be healthier and to be dedicated to losing weight if you are obese. Being overweight in itself is a danger, but obesity makes it worse, especially for men. Now, I brought up the issue of sleep apnea here because I'm coming across too many of our men within Yasharal that have sleep apnea. And though sleep apnea can be caused by, many different factors, one of the main causes of it among our people, our men in particular, is the fact that they are obese. Now, if you are above 100 pounds, of the weight, what you can call your now, I don't really like to use the term BMI because it can be confusing. I like to use the term your LBM, your lean body mass, because this is going to take into account many other things, not just bone, hair, but that is actually the best way to understand your weight to your height. Now, weight to height can be different for many people based on how their body is designed, their bone structure, so on and so forth. However, one thing that is true for all: if you're 100 pounds above what you may be familiar with, your body mass index, what it should be, your height, your weight to height ratio, or your LBM, your lean body mass, you're going to be considered morbidly obese, which means, what does that mean? Your ability, the ability for that weight to move you into a place of morbidity/death is high. And this is something that has to be addressed, and you have to really focus on losing weight, being active, not be sedentary. Many people already have types of employment that keeps them in a sedentary state, and you have to find ways to change that, right? So, maybe ones can look at, what can I do at my lunch hour? How far away am I from work? Can I walk today? These are all different things which we can look at later. But the most important thing is for you to understand some of this information that I'm providing, right? So, what's the fundamental message in this? Just because you do not have any of the three chronic diseases does not mean that you are fine if you are obese. Your heart can still stop because of the stress of having to deal with all that weight. This is sudden cardiac arrest, which can lead to sudden cardiac death. Many times people that have cardiac arrest, right, depending on how quickly help can reach them, most times they're going to die. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but particularly for our men, and this is also for our women also, think of your families, think of your children, all these things, all of whom it's going to impact. And I don't know, I'm going to mention this, and I'm not saying that anyone has this mind, but it would be foolhardy to think that because, we may be walking in truth and keeping Yahuwah's statutes and commandments, and that means that we don't have a role to play. So, if we're overcome with some illness that is self-imposed, then, we feel that, well, Yahuwah has some responsibility to us to heal us, or whatever the case would be. And I don't ascribe to that, because we live a real life which requires real actions in everything that we do, right? So, next point. Here are some things to look for, and some of these things the doctor will not tell you. This applies especially if you are obese, but also if you are not. If the skin on your cheeks or on the back of your neck gets much darker than your usual skin tone, if your fingernails or toenails get brittle, or your sweat begins to smell musty and sweet, you're showing signs of pre-diabetes. The alarm bells should go off, right? Don't disregard these things if you see them. You're still at a point where you can make changes and these things can be reversed. But the body is going to warn you. You're going to get warnings when certain things are not the way that they should be. And so I'm just giving you these things to look for on yourself. It doesn't matter how dark you are. It doesn't matter if you're brown, high brown, whatever you want to call yourself. These things are true. If you're very dark and you have, your skin will still get darker than your dark complexion, and the texture of the skin in those areas will be different. So the places on your face will be usually on your cheeks, right? The high point of your cheeks, and on the back of your neck. All right. Excessive belly fat restricts the lungs and does not allow for proper breathing. So what's happening here? You get to a point where you're very obese. That weight, particularly when you're lying down, presses down on the lungs, does not allow them to expand properly. You're unable to get proper oxygen-rich blood into your system, right? And so that causes problems, and this can bring on sleep apnea, and these other dysfunctions cause you to have all types of issues. So I want to encourage everyone that's listening, right, that, my position here is just to try to break through, to crack through some of the things that, some of you rather may need to overcome in order to move to that next place where you're healthy. I was saying to Enoch some weeks ago that, as we talk about maybe going from place to place, and because we're not sure what tomorrow is going to bring. For those that have diabetes, and almost all forms of it, can, with proper approach, can be turned around. If you have hypertension, all these things, suppose you don't have access to medication to maintain yourself, right? How is that going to work? So you have to take the steps now of correction, and you have to take the steps that you need to take to ensure that you don't get to any of these places, because what could be here today could be gone tomorrow. So I just want to, again, out of love, encourage all of us that we need to take stock. You have to take stock of your health, and the most important thing you have to do is you have to take stock of your weight. If you're overweight, lose it. If you're obese, lose it, right? if you're not, don't allow yourself to get there, and just be disciplined in your approach. And there's no sense in having a poor quality of life, particularly if you are young. Back pain, all of these types of things. So, again, just some information I hope was helpful and some words of encouragement. I think what I'm going to do from time to time as I'm continuing on in what I'm doing, I'm going to segue a bit, and I'm going to, touch on different things and put in things that we can, instead of having a weight, put in things that you can start to do, and showing you how to do these things to help many of you along the way get to the point where you need to be. So I'm in this walk with you, not just in righteousness, but also in this walk also, to ensure that what I can impart to you based on the skill that you was given me, the knowledge, and just how I've lived throughout my life, that it can be a barak to all of you. So in that, with that, I say shalom.